Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel. I'm Bryce, and this is episode 40 of Women's Soccer World, where we talk all about the world of women's soccer and all the glorious things going on within it. We've got another great show for you today, continuing with our coverage of the Olympics. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe at your leisure. I sure do appreciate it. First, we're going to talk about the United States women's national team versus Australia match. Then we're going to go ahead and preview the quarterfinals between the US women's national team and the Netherlands. And then we're also going to recap match day 3 of Olympic group stage play and talk about what quarterfinal games will be taking place. So, let's get started. Alright, my friends, let's talk about the US Women's National Team versus Australia match. This was the third day of group stage play, thus conducting it, and the US came away getting the job done. They secured the second seed and thus qualified for the quarterfinal, and they'll play the Netherlands in said quarterfinal on Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time. So for this game, they ended up drawing to Australia 0-0. And like I said, this game got the job done, but I have to say it was probably the most boring game I've ever seen since I started watching the US Women's National Team. I want to say that this performance was by and large pretty uninspired. It didn't look like there was a whole ton of energy going around. There weren't a lot of chances created. There was a lot of really poor passing. There was a lot of chances that were wasted away. It just wasn't a very good game overall from either side. And in terms of the US, like I said, the passing, especially the through balls, were pretty poor. If I had $1 for about every time I saw a long ball or a through ball played to a forward and it was just hit too hard and it sailed out for a goal kick, I'd probably be a pretty rich person. And I hate to say it like that, but it was like, man, it's just, it seemed like it happened 20, 30, 40 times by the time the game ended. It just kept happening so often. And even Arlo White started to point it out in the 70th, maybe even the 80th minute. I can't remember at this point, but I was glad I wasn't the only one who was thinking it. And I have to say, the team overall looked pretty tired, which I wasn't really expecting. But then again, I probably should have expected such things because with Olympic play, you only get so many days rest between all of these games. It's like usually 2 days rest, 3 at the most, and it wears on teams after a while, especially with not too many roster spots. I mean, even with the amount of roster spots they've increased it to, only allowing 2 days rest, it's not a lot in the world of football, and I think it's really starting to wear on the US, which rightfully so, because I couldn't just have 2 days rest in a 90-minute football game. That'd be impossible. If I had to pick players that were pretty lively, I think all of them came in the form of subs, with the exception of Roosevelt. I thought Roosevelt was pretty lively for most of the game. However, I want to say Carly Lloyd and Tobin Heath, when they were subbed on, they looked extremely lively and they were super energetic. I'd say Carly Lloyd was the most energetic out of the 3 I just mentioned. Going into more possession stats, this was one of the few games where I actually didn't see the US have the ball majority of the time. For this game, they only had possession for 39% of the time, while Australia had it for 61% of the time, which good on Australia for that, because that does not happen with the US very often, where they'll give the other team a ton of possession. But on the flip side of that coin, I have to be critical of Australia because they had the ball for the majority of the game and they didn't really have a ton to show for it. By now allowing the US to have the ball, the US didn't really have a ton of chances, but like I said, Australia, nothing was really doing much for them either. So this was by and large it just was not a good game. It was so back and forth. So many balls were being passed around between defenders, especially in the second half. Not a ton of chances created, not a lot of passes were strung together, not even really good attacking runs were really made. So there was just not really much to really enjoy about this game. And I think what really crushed this game was the number of breakaways where there were giveaways. I can recall probably 3 times total between Morgan and Press where they would be one-on-one with the keeper, they'd be one-on-one with the defender, they'd have a breakaway, and they would take a poor touch and eliminate their chance, or they would just shoot the ball right at the keeper, which I think that just kind of goes off of them being extremely tired because they have played a lot of minutes in these first 3 group stage games. So I can imagine that that's part of it, but yeah, it really killed momentum because it's like those were their chances and they were just pretty much squandered. I will say though, on the plus side of this game, the US, who I've been critical of their set pieces in the past before, they had one set piece where Megan Rapinoe had a short corner to Kelly O'Hara. Kelly O'Hara had a beautiful cross and Morgan scored off of a header. But unfortunately, according to VAR, she was offside. She was probably offside by just a strand of cloth on her right shoulder, which with VAR it happens. That's a whole nother conversation altogether, but that really stung because I think if they just would have scored that goal, that would have been all she wrote for the game, and the US would have came away with 3 points and a little bit more momentum, I think, going into this quarterfinal. But such is the way of life. And speaking of set pieces too, I gotta give it to Australia. They actually looked really, really dangerous on pretty much all of their corners and set pieces. They had a ton of those in the first half. I swear it was pretty close to double digits, if not in the double digits. And a lot of times they would get it to a point where they would either get ahead to it or the ball would kind of just be dropping, taking a couple bounces within the penalty area. And when you have that on set pieces, that's usually a pretty good sign that your team has a good chance to score if there's a loose ball in that area. And there was one instance very early on where they actually got ahead to it and it hit the crossbar. So for a while I thought Australia had a chance on those set pieces, but again, not a whole lot to show for the amount of set pieces that they had, which was in the double digits by the time the game was over. And aside from that, I thought Australia defended really, really well. Not really too much happened with Sam Kerr in this game. I was really expecting her to make some noise given how she performed the first 2 group stage games, but today just wasn't her day, and I really don't think it was any player's day. I can't name a single player throughout the match that I think that played particularly well. Thus, I actually am not going to give a woman of the match because I just genuinely do not think anybody played that well. Maybe I could make a case for Rose Lavelle because I thought she strung together some moments of brilliance and good passing, but even so, it just wasn't a great performance all the way around by any player on either side. At least I thought. My friends, those are just my thoughts on the US Women's National Team versus Australia match. What did you make of the match? Whatever you think, in the comment section is. Let's talk about the US Women's National Team's next game, which is going to be the quarterfinal match against the Netherlands. That's going to be airing on July 30th at 7 a.m. Eastern time. So another early game, but not too early like the Australia game and the Sweden game. So thank goodness for that. So for this particular game, if you recall the last 2 matchups between the US and the Netherlands, the US won both of those by a scoreline of 2-0. The U.S., I would say, pretty much dominated the last match between the two teams all the way back in November before Tobin Heath actually got injured. I thought that they handled the Netherlands pretty well and dominated the midfield throughout most of the match. In fact, I don't even think Netherlands had a shot on goal that entire game, and they were held to a clean sheet, so the U.S. played especially well that day. However, given the fact that the U.S. has had a pretty shaky group stage and players are starting to look a little bit more lethargic, a little bit more tired, I don't think that the U.S. is going to be a dominant force in this quarterfinal match as much as I want them to be. I'm a realist. Meanwhile, the Netherlands actually went undefeated in group play. They won 2 and drew 1 game to Brazil, who is another women's soccer powerhouse, of course. And in that time, Vivianne Miedema has scored 8 goals this competition, setting actually a women's Olympic single tournament record for most goals scored. She has scored 8. The previous record holder was Christine Sinclair of Canada, where she scored 6 in one tournament. Now, keep in mind, with that record, Vivianne Miedema can still play in the quarters and beyond if Netherlands keep playing well, so she could even add more to that tally. So I guess my point with that is the Netherlands are going to have no shortage of offensive power coming up in this particular game, and the U.S. have been a little shaky on defense. So if I'm Netherlands, I'm keen to capitalize on that, play to their strengths. However, on the flip side of that coin for the U.S., I think the U.S. are pretty keen on advancing past the quarterfinals and trying to win this tournament. Hypothetically speaking, if the U.S. were to win this game and then go on to win the Olympic tournament, they would be the first team, I believe, in women's soccer history to go ahead and win the World Cup and win the subsequent Olympic tournament thereafter. So they're chasing history at this point. Plus, if you recall, in the last Olympic competition, the U.S. lost to Sweden in the quarterfinals on penalties. So with that heartbreak in mind and the fact they've been waiting this competition for so long, it gives them another added vendetta, I guess you could say, in order to perform well in this tournament and just keep pushing forward. And overall, what are the stakes in this match for both teams? It's either win or go home. Overall, I'm going to say I think this is going to be a higher scoring affair given how much Netherlands have scored. I think ultimately the U.S. is going to come away with a 3-2 win. However, Vivianne Miedema is going to give the U.S. a ton of trouble, and I think she'll actually score a brace in this game. In order for the U.S. to win, I think they're going to need a goal from 3 different players to get it done. In the U.S., this won't be an easy win by any means. So to finish off this preview, who do I think is going to start with this match? In my forward line, I've got Rapinoe, Morgan, and Press. In the midfield, I've got Sam Ewis, Roosevelt, and Julie Ertz. And then in the back defense line, I've got Kelly O'Hara, Crystal Dunn, Becky Sauerbrunn, and Abby Dahlkemper. And then I've got Alyssa Nair starting in goal. My subs for this game, they're going to include Christy Mewis. I think she's going to come on at some point. I think Lindsay Horan's going to come on at some point. And I also think that Carly Lloyd and Tobin Heath are going to come on at some point for Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe. I would not be surprised, though, for a second if Carly Lloyd started over Alex Morgan and Tobin Heath started. So, my friends, those are all my predictions and guesses for the quarterfinal between the U.S. Women's National Team and Netherlands. But I want to know, what do you make of this game coming up? Who do you think will come away victorious? Whatever you think, the comment section is. Let me know. All right, so to round out this episode of Women's Soccer World, let's talk about what to expect for the quarterfinals and how match day 3 wrapped up. So for the quarterfinals, 8 different teams qualified. It includes the winners of groups G, F, and E. The 1 and 2 seeds all qualified, as well as a couple of 3 seeds. So 1 seeds that all qualified from each group include Great Britain, Sweden, and the Netherlands. The 2 seeds that qualified include the US, Brazil, and Canada. And then lastly, the 2 3 seeds that qualified were Australia and Japan. It's going to start off with Canada and Brazil, then it's going to go to Great Britain and Australia, then it's going to go to Sweden and Japan, and then finally it'll be finished off with the US Women's National Team against the Netherlands. So what resulted in the quarterfinals? Well, the results from match day 3 essentially starting off with the United States and Australia drawing by a score of 0-0, Sweden besting New Zealand by a scoreline of 2-0, Canada and Great Britain drawing by a score of 1-1. Japan and Chile squaring off, with Japan being victorious by a scoreline of 1-0. The Netherlands defeating China by a scoreline of 8-2. And then finally, Brazil besting Zambia by a scoreline of 1-0. So these matches resulted in the aforementioned 1, 2, and 3 seeds advancing to the quarterfinals, which, like I said, are going to be beginning on Friday, July 30th. And will take place at very early times, starting all the way back at 3 in the morning Eastern time. All right, my friends, what do you make of the match day 3 results? Any surprises? What was your most anticipated game? Whatever you think, comment below. Let me know. All right, my friends, that'll do it for this episode of Women's Soccer World. Thanks so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it. If you like videos just like this and want to get in on the fandom, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe at your leisure. It really helps out the channel, and I greatly appreciate it. Once again, I'm Bryce. This has been the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel, and until next time, have a great day.